Again, welcome everyone. Before we proceed with our evening, I just have to share how I even am here this afternoon in meeting Brian Lance. I met Brian Lance. He reached out to Texas Southern, the McLean Center, by an email. I manage the website. I manage the branding for our school, Barbara Joy McLean School of Public Affairs. And in doing so, I always check emails. And there was an email from Brian Lance asking a question. And what I do, I always call people, send them an email. So I made a phone call. I said, I saw you reaching out, so how can I help you? And he began speaking and said, I'm not sure how it happened. I said, listen, let's just have lunch next week at 12 o'clock, and we'll talk some more about this. Now, I really was expecting Brad to actually have lunch with me again. Figured he won't call back. He was there at 12 o'clock, and we've been having lunch every so often ever since then. At 12 o'clock, we bring our brown bags, and we have a lunch, and we just talk. And in so talking, it came into, I said to Brian, listen, I teach public budgeting. I'd love you to come to my class. He said, sure, I'll do this. He came to my class, and one of my students here appreciated it. And he spoken to us that one night, and he said, I said, more people need to hear this. My class said more people need to hear this, so we organized this session. So on that, I say, great having met you, Brian. I hope I continue knowing more, and we can continue building our relationship over the next few years, months, however long we given grace to be here.
Professor Anthony Rodriguez.
Right. I am, right. No. I typically don't ever introduce myself, so I am Anthony Michael Rodriguez. If I travel, I am Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Otherwise, I will be left out of the country if I don't remember that. I am Michael Anthony Rodriguez. That can actually have you deported by giving the wrong name. But for some reason in the U.S., I am Anthony Michael. But my passport, Michael Anthony. And they've told me the immigration, make sure. Michael Anthony, not Anthony Michael. No more mistakes. I'm standing on behalf of my dean, Dr. Michael Adams. Dr. Adams has been our interim dean actually since September the 1st. He's taken over from our previous dean, Dr. Bullard, and on his behalf, I want to say welcome to all of you. I expect us to have a very grand evening, and I hope that this will continue. So moving on in our schedule, the way we'll proceed this afternoon, I will introduce the speakers. Once I introduce them, they will come and have a talk. They'll return to their seats. Once each person has spoken, we'll then invite them to the table for a panel discussion. I believe the talks will be relatively short talks from each person. So our first guest. Our first guest is Mr. Yuan Zhao, PhD, Deputy Consul General of China in Houston. He assumed the office as of August 2014. Dr. Zhou joined the Foreign Service of China 21 years ago and spent 8 years at the United States Affairs Desk in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. Before his posting to Houston, he served in the Republic of Korea, Suriname, and Auckland, New Zealand. Dr. Zhao is a graduate of the Foreign Affairs University, Beijing, China, with a PhD in International Relations. His talk is entitled Belt and Road Initiative, Challenge or Opportunity. Dr. Zhao.
Oh, yes, that's better.
Just give you better reception.
Test. Yes, good, perfect. Yeah. I will use this one.
Your event is right here.
Okay, good. And my PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. This is my first time visit SM, the Southern University. Actually, I've been looking for this visit for a long time. But we have a very different schedule arrangements. Like if we want to go to university, then we need to get help from our education section. And our education section is always busy with their own schedule. So I spent 2 years to get the chance to be here. Thank you. As you know, China is expanding its power and influence while its economy is rising rapidly. But in some extent, I would add that such kind of change of power of economy and political influential are mostly peaceful and aiming at the coexistence and win-win cooperation with other countries, especially with the neighboring countries. So One Belt, One Road is one example of China's foreign policy, especially the foreign policy in the new era. I want to give you some clear picture by my best, because One Belt, One Road had become a catchphrase within especially the past 3 years. Many people label One Belt, One Road as China's geopolitical strategy. Sometimes the people, especially the neighboring countries, are saying the One Belt, One Road is for China's own interest, not a internationally win-win solution. So I want to clarify what One Belt, One Road is and what kind of aims and purpose behind the scene. I want to try 5 different perspectives. One is, where is the One Belt, One Road? And what are the main meaning of the initiative? It's not a strategy, it's an initiative. And third is that, what is the concrete measure or action China will do or China is doing? The fourth is that what's the challenge for China? Is China meeting some difficulty, or just very smoothful? And the last one is, what is the opportunity One Belt, One Road provide with the United States? Because the United States is not a country within the Asia, Europe, Eurasia, and even Africa, Latin America region. Through such kind of 5 perspective, I want to give you a picture. First of all, many people know the word Silk Road. Yes, Silk Road is an old name. Actually, as early as 2,000 years ago, the people in China, both in China and the Middle East, began with trading. The businessmen from China and from Middle East carried the silk, the tea, the porcelain, and sometimes copperware on camelback to trade with each other. That's 2,000 years ago. So the Silk Road actually was a trade route on land. This trade route took shape 2,000 years ago, but the name Silk Road actually was not that old. That was in 1877. A German geographer whose name is Ferdinand von Richthofen, who coined the name Silk Road. Then later on, many Western people used the Silk Road to describe the old ancient trade route between China and Europe. Why the Silk Road, the ancient Silk Road, declined before 1,300 years ago? That's because that in West China, a lot of wars and conflicts took place between China and the Western neighboring countries, or inside China, different minority fought each other. So the fights, the wars blocked the land route between China and Europe. So the businessmen used the alternative trade route, especially on the sea. So they changed their the route. I would say they used the port Guangzhou, Fuzhou, and Ningbo, passing through the South China Sea, Southeast Asian countries, Malacca Straits, to the Indian Ocean, and further on to African country, especially Kenya, and the Red Sea. The final designation was Greece and Italy. So we call it Maritime Silk Road. These two routes, we call it Land Silk Road and the Maritime Silk Road. In short words, we call it one belt. Actually, the Silk Road economic belt, and the one road, the 21st century Maritime Silk Road. So these two words describe the China's economic program with the neighboring countries, especially in Asia, Africa, some European countries. Geographically, the two initiatives exclude any country in America and Latin America. But what is interesting is that 2 years ago, the Chile president proposed China need to use its fund or financial means to build a cross-Pacific fiber optics. That's another kind of infrastructure program. And that will be very beneficial both to China, to Asian countries, and the Latin American developing countries. So nowadays, we always emphasize that one belt, one road covers Asia, Europe, Africa, but it's not limited to that regions. We welcome all countries, the private companies, organizations to join the program. And the theme is develop this region to achieve win-win solution. From this picture, I will tell you that how many participants are doing together. We always say there are two categories. One is countries, and the other is international or regional organizations. When we talk about the participating countries, we categorize them to three parts. North is Russia and Mongolia. South is India and Pakistan. Altogether, I think there are 11 countries. And Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, to the end of Southeast Asian country like East Timor, Indonesia, many, many countries. That's the three parts. And then we move on to the west. We have the Middle Asian countries, 5. That's Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, this area. And Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, 5 Middle Asian countries. And further on, we go to Africa. Usually, when we talk about African countries in the One Belt, One Road initiative, we mostly focus on the east part and the north part, like Egypt, Kenya. We didn't touch too far to the south point of African continent. If we talk about European countries, we didn't cover all the Europe. We mostly are talking about the East European countries like Poland or Hungary or Czech, Slovakia, that area, because this region was closely connected to China's trade relations in ancient time. And this region is also the developing countries. So focused on developing countries is our priority when we carry on the One Belt, One Road initiative. The reason China is so working hard on the initiative of One Belt, One Road have different kind of, how to say, purpose. Many people are asking, why you worked so hard on that purpose, or why you worked so hard on One Belt, One Road. I would say, first of all, this year is a special year. China's National Congress will be held the end of this year or autumn. So it's a #1 political agenda in China's leaders' schedule. So the government and the leaders want to speed up the One Belt, One Road initiative to get more concrete, specific win-win economic development. And before the National Party, we have a very important international summit. That's the Beijing Summit, One Belt, One Road Beijing Summit. That will be held in Beijing, May 14 through 15. And we have already invited more than 60 countries to attend, and more than 30 countries, presidents or premiers confirmed to attend the summit. We are still in the process of preparation. And the objective of the Beijing Summit have three folds. One is review what kind of early harvests we have getting. Because in 2013, both Premier Li Keqiang and President Xi Jinping announced the initiative when they visited the relevant countries. Like Li Keqiang visited the southeast countries, and President Xi Jinping visited some African countries. And also, 2015, President Xi Jinping also visited Latin American countries. Many developing countries raised the same topic. Can we work together to promote the economic development? So we fully agree on that, and we want to use a connection slogan to combine all the countries together. So review the progress and to build more consensus on concerted development is the number one purpose of the summit and of the initiative. Secondly, I want to say many people are talking about the atmosphere, especially the economic atmosphere in the world. Globalization or deglobalization, free trade or fair trade, protectionism or more openness. So many disputes took place these days. But last year, China convened the G20 summit in Hangzhou. The main theme is that we need to move on the process of globalization. Just as President Xi Jinping announced in Davos Forum last month, we cannot emerge as a winner with protectionism. Nobody should limit itself to a dark room without fresh air. The problem today is not caused by globalization. The reason is war and conflicts. So the picture, the philosophy of China is very clear. We want to strengthen on the globalization, the free trade, and we want to fight against protectionism. So put more energy on the G20 summit outcomes and extend China's philosophy on globalization is the second reason we want to hold the Beijing summit. And of course, you may ask, you don't have your own idea, your own interest under the initiative of One Belt, One Road? I would say, yes, China has its own interest in this initiative. Why? You know, China's GDP per capita is $8,000 US. It's only 1/3, I think, of US GDP per capita. So China is on the uphill process. It's very crucial. We are now is like in the pinching. It's a very crucial conjuncture. We need to overcome the difficulties. We need to step onto the second phase of development. So we want to use a new initiative to update our open up and reform. Now, what's the second phase of China's opening up and reform? We have 5 words: innovation, concerted program, green development, and sharing, and then inclusiveness. So that's quite complicated, but it's very vivid idea of China's thinking. That is China need to change the model of development to the to a new phase, not only working hard, use the old-fashioned capital or labor-intensive model. We need to make use of innovation. We make to sometimes have production capacity organization, cooperation. Many economic experts are saying that China is transferring its overproduction capacity to other countries because China produces a lot of steel, aluminum, iron, whatever. So China needs to transfer its overcapacity to other countries. Is that true or not? I would say in some extent it is true. China have too many capacities. But this excessive capacity is not excessive to other countries. Many countries in the Southeast Asian countries need the capacity. Not only in Southeast China, but also Middle East, even in Africa. They need a lot of China's steel, China's technology, China's capital to build their own country. So I would say China has its own domestic interest, but also it is built on a win-win solution. So with the three folds of purpose, one is review the progress in past 3 years and push on the outcome of G20 summit in Hangzhou, and also realize our own domestic economic program. We have to move on and work hard on the One Belt, One Road initiative. This picture shows that when we are preparing the summit, how many countries will attend the summit and what kind of country will take part in the program. When we talk about the One Belt, One Road initiative, many people are saying, is your initiative or everybody's initiative? Is your program or program agreed upon by other countries? Yes, it's a very good question. If China only work on its own purpose, that is not welcomed by other people. So consultation is a key word. China need to get the consultation and agreement with other countries. Otherwise, nobody will not join your program. So consultation is the step one of China's initiative on One Belt, One Road. Contribution means that this program is a colossal, giant economic program. China cannot do it by itself. Even China has the biggest foreign currency deposit, but China is not able to do all the things. So we need to work together with all the countries, of course with American companies, your banking system, your private sectors. A lot of people should join the contribution. And shared benefits, yes, shared benefits. If your initiative cannot give benefits to the neighboring countries, who will join? Many people are saying China-Pakistan economic corridor is quite on the way and achieved a lot of achievements. Why? Because it's good. It's conducive to Pakistan's own national development. Although people are arguing that China wants to get access to the sea, China wants to get closer distance between Kunming, Yunnan province to the Indian Ocean. Yes, China has its strategic purpose, but it's also very conducive and helpful to the development of Pakistan and the neighboring countries. So shared benefits is crucial. Without shared benefits, nobody will join the initiative. Yeah, I mentioned the spirits. Yes, the initiative is peaceful, as I mentioned before. And this initiative is open in inclusiveness. Like more than 60 countries and more than 40 organizations are participating in this initiative. And of course, we need a mutual learning because something to China is new. China has little experience in financing, international and regional financing. China's banking system is very weak. we are still in the learning process. Learn from the Western countries. China's banking system and China's biggest Exim Bank and the National Development Bank are doing its old-fashioned program with African countries bilaterally. Yes, we are the experts. But how to organize third parties together and how to do more private banking financing way, it's new to us. So in many, many places, like in Africa, when we are building the water supply system or railway system, we get a lot of helps from European banks and American banks. We learn the expertise from them, since projects are not based on the preferential arrangements. Most of the projects are based on market-based, business-like agreements. So to make profits is the purpose for the bankers and the companies to do so. So I need to mention mutual learning is very important for China and for the relevant countries. For instance, when we are asking, does China consult with other countries? I want to mention several examples. Like China did a consultation with Mongolia on their Step Road program, because Mongolia initiated its own national development program. And also, Kazakhstan has its own Road to Brightness that's also focused on infrastructure construction. We need to consult with them. Is there an overlap part between China and Kazakhstan? Kazakhstan wants to build their own natural gas piles, and we need to. We need to make use of the very rich natural gas reserve. So we need to find the common ground. Otherwise, Kazakhstan will not join us. Tajikistan also. So Turkmenistan, strong and happy era. So the neighboring countries have their own individual ideas. And we want to know what your ideas are, and can we find some common ground. Once we find the common ground, then we can make detailed program. Nowadays, China had set up with the neighboring countries, altogether 21 countries, altogether within the during the 3 years, China and the neighboring countries set up 56 economic zones. Some are tax-free zones. Some are just the combination of tourism and economic development. And some are just financing hub. So altogether, 56 economic zones were set up. That's the early harvest during the 3 years. And people are also asking, One Belt, One Road seems like too big, macro, conceptual idea. Do you have very specific or concrete tools to grab, to work on? I would say yes, we do have some concrete things. And those concrete things actually were set up earlier than we make the name One Belt, One Road initiative. The six corridors are just what we mentioned, the concrete tools. This one, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This corridor was initiated as early as 2011. 3 years before we announced the One Belt, One Road initiative. China-Mongolia-Russia Economic Corridor. That's also 1 year before we announced the One Belt, One Road. New Eurasia Land Bridge Economic Corridor. Yes, we call it the land bridge from the China's Lianyungang to Rotterdam to Europe. This corridor had been worked on for many years, more than 10 years. And we also have the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor. This corridor is initiated not by Chinese people. Bangladesh experts in the university proposed the initiative 60 years ago, and it was accepted by the neighboring countries, the relevant countries. China agreed on their idea and began to invest money on this initiative. So these 6 corridors took place under different background, but now we bind them together for them to become the pillars, the 6 pillars under the One Belt, One Road initiative. With them, we can work together on very solid foundation, and with the countries they are willing to do with us. When we talk about initiative, which is very conducive to China, many people will think like this way. It's your idea, and it's very good for yourself. You must do a lot of preferential loans, grants to those countries. And many people surely will wait and depend on China's assistance or help to begin with their project. Is that true? I would say most part of the projects are based on the equally and beneficially based. Most of them are based on the market-oriented projects. That means that Chinese entrepreneurs need to make money, and the relevant countries need to make money too. So we have to make use of all kinds of financial and monetary tools. For instance, for initiative of One Belt, One Road, we invited the World Bank, Asia Development Bank, and we also set up a new body, which is Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. For some time, this is not accepted by Obama administration, but I have no idea what kind of attitude or position the new administration will take. But personally, I think Donald Trump will have a new idea on AIIB because, frankly speaking, it is very conducive to America's economy. And of course, we have our own contribution, like Exim Bank of China, Development Bank of China, and also China's private companies like IZBC or construction company. For instance, when we work together with Egypt to build the grid electricity system, China's Development Bank signed agreement with your government with the altogether $17 billion to do so. That is governmental agreement, but we do have private contracts under the umbrella. Many people are joining this. Even some Western countries' private companies are joining this program. We need to use a lot of private funds, like venture capital. Some venture capital from America too. I know some American companies are doing the projects. In my memory, there is a company, medium to small company, Innovari, whose base is in Austin. They are doing the energy management surveillance project in Africa. And also some Houstonian company like Headwood. Headwood is a wastewater treatment company. This small green company is doing business in Myanmar, in Middle East, with Chinese companies. So actually, private sectors have a great potential to work together on the projects under the big umbrella of One Belt, One Road initiative. Of course, we have different models to do so. Many projects is long-term project, like a subway system in Iran, like a railway system. I don't think they will getting profits within 5 years or 10 years. Maybe it will take 50 years to get money back. So that's quite difficult for a private company to do so. But we have some new idea, like a combination of treatment, BOT. What is BOT? Build it, operate it, and transfer it. We can build a subway in Iran, Tehran, and operate it to get money. And finally, after 20 years or 30 years, we transfer the ownership back to Iran government. So there are several different kind of business style model to do so. The only purpose is that let the investors got the good things. Let the company got their own profits. Only with win-win solution, all the relevant parties will be willing to do so. Does China have challenges? It seems like great, a big picture, a wonderful future, beneficial to everybody. So is it easy? I don't think so. It's difficult, actually. For instance, we do met a lot of difficulties either from domestic companies or province or from countries outside. Let me take example. When we push, move on, work hard on the China-Pakistan economic corridor, the Yunnan province or the Guangxi autonomous region waited and listened to the central government. They will say, the central government of China initiated the program. You have your big picture, the national strategy. Our province individually will do our parts. But when will you give us the preferential rates of the loans? And what kind of policy the central government will give us? Let our people to do business with the neighboring countries like Laos, Pakistan. Actually, we have so many preferential rates of loans. We depend on so much on the medium and small business and the local government itself. So this problem is a severe problem. We have to do a lot of education to the local government, saying that it is based on your own responsibility. We have national picture. We have a strategy, we have initiative, but most of the work is based on market-oriented economy. So domestic excessive demand on preferential rates financing became the burden of the central government. Besides, we have a lot of political doubts and worries. 3 years passed, we did harvest a lot of concrete fruits, but still we met a lot of difficulty, obstacles, at home and outside. When we are doing the objects in Myanmar, yes, we are doing the renovation of the villages, we are building the reservoir, and we are building the railway in Pakistan. The environmental protectionism and the Labor Party, human rights organizations filed quite a lot of lawsuits to relevant government, and they have our own voices. In some cases, relevant countries had to stop the project, which had been on the process with China, like a reservoir in Myanmar. So, political elements, the doubts of China's strategy, and the worries of the so-called China's dominance in this region still do its part. So we have to do a lot of education. We have to do some publicity to tell the people that is based on win-win outcome. That is not only based on China's own interest. That's the biggest challenge. And how to do so? President Xi Jinping mentioned internally in our internal meeting, saying that actually relevant provinces and the relevant either state-owned company or private companies, you need to handle 3 relations. I just put it on my PowerPoint. One is government and enterprises. That means that this initiative is for the interest of the people. Government need to do government thing. Enterprises need to make money. You have to keep the balance. The second is government and the society. Sometimes when China's entrepreneurs enter the relevant countries, they don't study the culture. They don't study the religious background. They don't study the personal relations in that country. So they got the obstacles, sometimes severely. So government and society, the relations is very important for the entrepreneurs to learn. Third, China's interest and the partners' interests. I mentioned so much on the previous remarks. China need to tell the people we are doing together for our common interests. Otherwise, nobody will join us. The fourth, opening up at the national security. Yes, it's the overall opening up and updating the reform so quickly. So, does China have some security problem? Yes, we do, especially for the security of the border area. We have Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Some terrorists came from Afghanistan when we do business with them. So security, economic interests, that's a very subtle balance we need to keep. Fifth, national goal, local goal. As I mentioned, Inner Mongolia had its own interest. For the nation, China want to make Inner Mongolia as the first stop to connect Mongolia, Russia, and further on Europe countries. But Inner Mongolia autonomous region focused on its own trading relations with Mongolia. They don't want to spend too much money on the projects with Russia and even more European countries. So central government and local government need to talk for different interests. And finally, economic and culture, people-to-people exchange. Just as I mentioned, China do also One Belt, One Road initiative in Egypt. The very important part of the initiative is cultural exchange. So infrastructure is not limited to railway, highway, fiber optics, or water system. There are culture things, because culture, the friendship between peoples, are the foundation of cooperation. We need to do a lot on culture exchange. So altogether, 6 relations are the key to solve the challenge, to meet the challenge, to solve the problems. And finally, I would say, for our companies and organizations and governments in America, especially for southern United States, we want to give you some example how American people can benefit from One Belt, One Road initiative. For companies, it's clear. The company will pursue the profits. We can give the picture and a very detailed project to companies for them to think about what kind of contribution they can do. As I mentioned, if you are a wastewater treatment company, yes, we have a project in Myanmar. You can come. And it has only very low, like a 2% rate of loan. You can make money of that. And also it will be conducive to the livelihood of Myanmar people in the poor villages. Yes, they will come. And also, when China transfer its technology of high-speed railway system or the just highway, I mean the roads, and also China is good at making the the power station, power plants. We transfer money, we transfer technology. But China cannot transfer all things. We need more advanced things. Where to get that? I would say China always refer them to American countries and Western countries. They enjoy more high-level technology and high-level management. So for those advanced companies, they can find the good things to join in. That's simple. But how to persuade the government to support? That's very difficult. Still, as diplomats, the Consulate General and also our embassy, DC, are working so hard on your government in DC and in relevant cities. I would say, overall atmosphere between China and USA on US-China relations is in a very crucial stage. A month ago, many people are saying, look, after Donald Trump stepped into White House, China will face a very severe new president. That will be crazy people. But nowadays, just 3 days ago, President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump had a very cordial, lengthy, and fruitful conversation, telephone conversation. And it was surprisingly to listen that Donald Trump said, USA would stick on the one China policy. We could be partner. Wow. Atmosphere just is changing. It's changing to the direction of positive goals. So overall speaking, I would say US-China bilateral relations is on the good track. We positively foresee the direction, the development of bilateral relations. With such kind of perspective and anticipation, we have to work hard on this, your federal government. But that's not all what we have to do. We have to do more on subnational level. What is subnational? We need to do a more lobbying in Austin, capital. We need to do a lot in county and to get closer relations with the judges and have good relations with the mayors of different cities, Sugar Land, Pearland, whatever. So for this level, for the good relations between China and America, nationally, subnationally, even the village, county level, we need to do a lot. The only purpose is that persuading American people to think, to believe, to trust that China is willing and is looking forward to getting stronger, positive relations with America. Both the government and the private companies can make profits and good things in China's initiative, which is One Belt, One Road initiative. So finally, I want to make a conclusion. Initiative of One Belt, One Road is China's one, but also it's something which belongs to the world. China will work hard on its development, but China also wants to work together with the neighboring countries, with the relevant countries, even with America, to build a win-win outcome in the world economy. Thank you.
We thank you, Dr. Zhou. Very detailed. If you didn't know much of the One Road or One Belt, right now I think we've all been learnt on the subject, and I'm thankful to it. Now let's bring up Dr. Ms. Rehan Khalif. Yes, Consul of the Egyptian Consulate in Houston, arrived in Houston March 2016. A career diplomat. She has been with the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 18 years, including posting to the Kingdom of Bahrain and France. She has also served in several ministry departments in Cairo, Arab World Department, Refugee Department, Consular Affairs Department. She holds a BSc in Political Science, Economics, and Economics from the University of Cairo, and a high diploma of French Studies from the Sorbonne University, France. Consul Khalif is fluent in French, Arabic, and English, and knows a little Spanish. She is the mother of 2 daughters who accompany her in all of her travels and who is proud to call her citizen of the world. Welcome, and we welcome you to the podium, please.
Can you hear me when I speak in this microphone? Yes. I can speak louder. Yes. Okay, great. Okay, because I use both hands. Dr. Yamin Zhao, Deputy Consul General of China, Mr. Brian Lantz, representative of the Schiller Institute, Professor Anthony Rodriguez, Dean's Office, students, guests, and great audience of the Texas Southern University. It is with great pleasure that I speak in front of all of you today on the impact of such an important project as the New Silk Road on the political and economic development of my country. Egypt had already a pivotal role in the old Silk Road, which was disrupted and disintegrated in 1720. Back then, thanks to its geographic position and its unique capabilities, Egypt participated in enriching the system of old roads that used to link between the continents of the ancient world. Thus, aside of being the principal entrance for the transfer of goods and people between Asia and the Arab world, Egypt had also a major role in the human development of the ancient world with the transfer of culture. We are all aware of how the Egyptians managed to transfer important sciences between ancient civilizations, which had a great impact on the development of the whole human civilization back then. Thus, as soon as the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, announced in October 2013 his initiative of reviving the Silk Road in both its maritime and land sections, the Egyptian-Chinese relations gained a new momentum and were transformed into a full partnership between the two countries. This was highlighted during the visit of the Chinese president to Cairo in January 2016. During this visit, the Egyptian role was transcended from being just a station on the Silk Road to a major partner without which the initiative could not be complete. During my intervention, I will present the Egyptian role in the New Silk Road project based on the following points. Why is Egypt interested in the Chinese initiative? How is Egypt's participation important in the success of the New Silk Road project? The development of the Egyptian-Chinese relations thanks to the New Silk Road project, and what is the way ahead for Egypt? So, my first point is, why is Egypt interested in the Chinese initiative? Egypt and China both share the same vision when it comes to the objectives of New Silk Road. They both consider that the economic cooperation, the human and cultural interactions, the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs, the policy of open doors, and the access to development are all basic tools to achieve peace, prosperity, and stability to all countries. Moreover, as the leading country in the Middle East and Africa, Egypt is very keen to adopt this initiative because it considers it to be the material representation of the development by peace. In fact, Egypt sees the New Silk Road to be the economic and developmental gateway that will give solutions to the region's economic and political crisis and will overcome the sources of clashes through the establishment of dialogue and interaction between nations. As far as the main objectives of the New Silk Road are concerned, Egyptian expectations consist of increase in the trade flows, creation of global added value chains, harmonization of economic and monetary policies, development of transportation infrastructures and networks, adjustment of projects between the different beneficiaries, and support of understanding between nations through cultural and people exchanges. All these objectives are in line with the development strategy of the actual Egyptian leadership, consisting of sustained development and big national projects aiming at ameliorating the Egyptian infrastructure as well as the renewal of both the industrial and agricultural sectors. These objectives are also in line with Egypt's endeavors to promote its financial and monetary policies and to improve its administrative structure through adopting the most up-to-date technologies. My second point is about how Egypt's participation is important in the success of the new Silk Road project. Egypt has always had a pivotal role in the international trade flows and in China's foreign commercial transactions because of its geographical position as a center between three continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe. It is the only crossing point of the maritime Silk Road between the Indian Ocean and the European continent, as well as Northern Africa. Thus, it is impossible to realize the Silk Road without Egypt's participation and partnership. Egypt is actually conducting the biggest and most comprehensive infrastructural development in the Middle East and Africa. The new Suez Canal is the international maritime passage linking the Indian Ocean with the Mediterranean Sea. It benefits from unprecedented power to absorb the estimated increase in commercial flows for long years to come. It also enjoys a preferential treatment in the economic field from the east of the United States and South Europe till Southeast Asia. In parallel to the new Suez Canal, Egypt is also investing in development pathways by connecting roads and transportation networks. The most recent pathways are East and West Port Said Port, Al Adabia Port, Ain El Sokhna Port, El Arish Port, El Tur Port, and the Ismailia Technology Valley Project. Egypt's assets do not only rely on its traditional industry. It also invests in new, innovative, and scientific industrial products. As an apparent example, we can notice that the industrial zone in the Suez Canal provides logistic and industrial services to Saudi Arabia, which constitutes a gate to the Gulf countries, to the maritime port of Mombasa in Kenya, and to Djibouti as a gate to Ethiopia and the center of Africa. Moreover, as far as Egypt's role in facilitating China's foreign trade is concerned, China benefits from both the Egyptian internal market, which possesses a high purchasing power, 11% increase of bilateral trade between Egypt and China in 2015, and from the treaties Egypt has signed with a large number of countries, such as the Arab Free Trade Area, the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, the EU-Egypt Association Agreement, the Free Trade Agreement between Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia, the Agadir Agreement, the trade agreement between Egypt and the Mercosur bloc comprising Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, in addition to the bilateral preferential agreements with Turkey and the USA. China's access to all these markets through Egypt gives its exports a 2 billion people market. My third point, the development of the Egyptian-Chinese relations thanks to the new Silk Road. Although Egypt and China have shared centuries-long relations and 60 years of official bilateral diplomatic ties, I would like to underline 2016 as a crucial year in the development of these relations. In fact, during the Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Egypt in January 2016, the bilateral relations were promoted to a comprehensive strategic partnership. A Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, was signed between the two parties to implement the Silk Road project, in addition to the signature of 20 different Memorandum of Understandings, including the development of the Suez Canal corridor and the construction of a new administrative capital, and the expansion of bilateral cooperation in trade, finance, space technology, energy, human resources development, and security. During this visit as well, China agreed to invest the amount of $15 billion in Egyptian projects, and a new big industrial zone, more than 75 million square feet, was allocated to China in the Suez Canal zone in order to encourage Chinese companies to invest, especially those from China's competitive sectors such as textile and steel. It is noteworthy that China has already more than 86 companies active in the Suez Canal zone, worth $1.1 billion of investments. China is also benefiting from Egypt's being one of the founders of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. So what is the way ahead for Egypt? Egypt benefits once again from its geostrategic position in the African continent. China's vision intends to include the east coast of Africa and is building important infrastructure projects there, among which maritime ports in Tanzania, railroads between Mombasa Maritime Port and the Kenyan capital Nairobi, and modernization of maritime structures in Djibouti. Therefore, Egypt's position will allow the Chinese party to have access to the east coast of the continent and to its center as well. Recently, a string of sizable natural gas discoveries has been made in the eastern Mediterranean region on the coast of Egypt's Nile Delta. These finds attract China, who is considered to be one of the biggest markets in the world in the consumption of natural gas from the time being and in the future. From all what has been presented in my intervention, it's clear more than ever how such an important project as the new Silk Road project impacts on the peace process all over the world. My country, Egypt, is part of 10 regions, the Middle East from one side and the African continent from another side. And for decades, it participated in trying to find a peaceful solution and just solution to these ongoing conflicts. Notwithstanding all the efforts that were exerted, the situation in these regions is still volatile and fragile. Peace through economic development is thus not only a new paradigm, it is also a new viable solution, as political and military solutions have failed to achieve their objectives. And allow me to end my intervention with these citations of Lauren K. Freeman, researcher and editor of Executive Intelligence Review magazine. Today, there is also an alternative future visible for African nations. It is represented first and foremost by the shift undertaken by the Egyptian government of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi toward crash programs of major infrastructures development, which would not only lift up the condition of the Egyptian people, but also link up Africa and the Euro-Asian continent. The second quotation, Egypt can indeed be a model for nations in Africa and throughout the world of how to turn around an economy for the general welfare of its citizens, present and future. I thank you.
Consul of the Egyptian Consul, Rahim Khalif, that was excellent. Thank you. You made a point as far as connecting with the new Silk Road, connecting with China. And one, as we bring up Brian Lance, one of the key connections is also when there's unity, there's so much power in what we can accomplish. And you said accomplishing these things through economic development, using peaceful methods, overcoming some of the world's weaknesses, some of the countries where we have seen. Last year, the United Nations indicated the next 30 years should be the years of getting out of poverty. And when you have projects where people work together in unity, getting out of poverty is a reality for many countries. And on that, let's bring in Brian Lantz, my new friend. He's representing the Schiller Institute. Brian is a founding member and representative of the Schiller Institute. He's here, founded in 1984 by Helga Zapp LaRoche. The Schiller Institute is working around the world to defend the rights of all humanity to progress, material, cultural, and intellectual. Mr. Lantz has been engaged in dialogue on these topics for 4 decades as a researcher, writer, and activist. On economics, Lantz has begun a series of presentations on the reports of the Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, the father of the American system of political economy. Lantz shows that Hamilton would recognize strong parallels between his own thinking and the principles of the work in China's rapid economic and human development, lifting 800 million people out of poverty in less than 40 years. Now that's truly amazing. And if we can continue in unity, as it says, if they're in unity, there's nothing that we cannot do. Brian Lantz, please.
Thank you, Professor Rodriguez. Can I be heard, or should I? No. Oh. Testing, testing. There we are. Okay. All right. Okay, let's see, we got to get that out of here.
I'll get it for you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Right here, the chromium. Yep. That's what he just clicked on, and it brought up her. Try the chromium again. This is Mike. Mike's helping out here.
Hello. Here you go. Slides.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And
Thank you, Mike.
yeah. All right. Okay. Well, yes. I mean, so much has been covered. Hopefully, what I will present will just kind of fill out many of the concepts and bring in more to the fore the role of the United States. Not only the role with the Silk Road, but the transformation of the United States by adopting Hamiltonian policies again. And I'll come to that at the conclusion. What you see on the screen now is well, it's the conference that we held in Berlin, as noted there, in June of just this last year, creating a common future for mankind and a renaissance of classical culture. There were participants from 23 countries that took part as in presentations over those 2 days. And the key point I want to start with, and it really underscores what Council Khalif referenced or closed with, that we really are on the verge, on the cusp of creating a global security concept to replace geopolitics. And I want to just say a word, because that word gets thrown around. I want to say a word about it. Power blocks. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I have no permanent friends, only permanent interests. These are geopolitical concepts, the Cold War concepts, concepts of empire and so forth. It goes back to Sir Halford Mackinder at the turn of the last century. But we're still operating, in fact, operating more today, or have been, in that framework, in thinking about the world and our role in it. But now, with the new Silk Road, with the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRICS nations, we have a just new world order coming into perspective. And security is security through economic development. It's security through finding the basis of collaboration among nations, as Deputy Consul General Shao, as well as Consul Khalif have emphasized. Win-win, mutual benefit, mutual consultation, and so forth. These are terms that are used on the Belt and Road. Ambassador Chas Freeman was one of the speakers, one of the keynote speakers at our conference in Berlin. He's one of the United States' most senior diplomats. He translated for President Nixon in the trip to China, the opening up to China. He went on to become a major ambassador in the Middle East. And he continues to play a major role in foreign policy making. In speaking at our conference in June, he emphasized, he said, that the Belt and Road Initiative, what China has undertaken, is the greatest infrastructure program in the history of mankind. And if the U.S. were to cooperate with it, the world would breathe a sigh of relief. So here we have a picture of the Belt and Road. We've been talking about it. This is from Mercator. I want to emphasize a few different points here. Here, let me say the corridors that we've been talking about of economic development. These are not, for example, with railway or maritime, these are not simply point to point. It's not from getting from point A to B like flying an airplane. The corridors are themselves open up vast areas, vast resources, most importantly human creative resources, to develop, to build new cities. If we think back to the Continental Railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States, initiated by Abraham Lincoln, it gives you an idea of this. But now this process is accelerated. And so you have these projects, inland ports, new cities, transportation hubs. There are now, for example, across the Eurasian land bridge that was referred to earlier, you now have 39 different routes between China and Europe, Europe including Russia, 39 routes. You have just signed the agreement to build the railroad from Moscow to Kazan, high-speed rail. When that's completed all the way to Beijing, a trip that takes weeks will be a matter of hours. These projects transform space-time relations among people and the productive process as a whole. Everything changes. Relationships change. In terms of China's own development of high-speed rail, in which it leads the world, as you probably know, over some 20,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. We don't have a single mile in the United States yet. We've got to get on that. There was the idea that these railroads being built by China would in fact never pay off. The costs were just too enormous. How could you build such projects? Well, already The Economist, the magazine London Economist, you may know it as, which is one of those that were poo-pooing this whole process, had to admit a few weeks ago in its publication that in fact already these railroads, these high-speed rail systems, the busiest of them, have doubled the business activity along these lines. In other words, 50% of those traveling on these high-speed rail had never traveled those routes before. The movement of people, of produce, of product, of ideas is accelerated. So the very relations, the very nature of human thinking, and thinking in terms of what's possible and what can be brought into being, are changed affirmatively. A kind of optimism is spread. Let me continue here. The corridors, but I've covered that. This is, I just want to give you a picture. Most of you, I hope, have seen these. These are examples of high-speed rail trains in China. You also find them, of course, in Japan. But this is what we're talking about. 300, 400 kilometer an hour high-speed transport. A grid of this, transforming relations. Think of that in terms of the United States. I wanted to also emphasize that this process that we're talking about here, this new concept of global security, this is already a complex of nations. Deputy Consul General Shao was emphasizing the Belt and Road Initiative, rightfully. It isn't just a matter that he's from China. It's something to be rightfully emphasized. It's the cutting edge. But already we have the BRICS nations, which have come into being: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. The BRICS nations, this is a cooperative arrangement among nations, and they'll be holding their next annual summit in Beijing, I believe in September. This represents another overlapping collaboration of efforts. There's the new development bank that's been created by the BRICS nations, other associations, cultural exchanges, scientific forums, new schools, and so forth. Now, in terms of Africa, to put a little more meat on the bone, on the left is a photograph or a schematic of roughly the railroad system that's existed in the continent of Africa up until now. Almost all of it's colonial railroad that simply moved material from the mines to the ports. Simply a colonial policy, a one-way, really a one-way ticket. On the right is the process that's beginning to be built out. One of the most recent railroads that's been open, and you may have heard something about this, is the high-speed rail or electrified rail from Djibouti to the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Uncharacteristically, the New York Times had a wonderful article on this on February 7th by Andrew Jacobs, titled "Joyous Africans Take to the Rails with China's Help." This is the first electrified rail to connect two countries in Africa. It already has averted famine in the area reached by it. Kenya has a similar railroad project underway, a collaborative effort between Kenya and China. And there's projects from Egypt, plans from Egypt reaching south, highways, rails from Egypt down, as the transportation minister spoke about it last year, all the way to the Cape. These are the intentions. Part of that, if you go back to that last map, is for the first time rails that reach all the way across the continent. For the first time in Africa. Here's another project. And let me just mention a few in terms of the complex of nations involved here. Besides the BRICS, there's the institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, of course. There's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, ASEAN, are all being brought into this collaborative effort. So I just wanted to fill that out. But here we have a map of one of what will be one of the largest projects. If you look at the smaller map up in the upper right-hand corner, you get the dimensions of this. This is a water project for the Chad Basin. Lake Chad, which is drying out, which has created a festering hellhole as it's collapsed. Boko Haram is active in the southwest part of this area, just as an example, and so forth. Well, this project, which we have promoted for over a decade, probably 2 decades, was referred to as Project Transacqua. It was developed by Italian engineering company, but no one would take it up. IMF, World Bank, you name it, consortia, no one would take up this project. It will move water from the tributaries to the Congo, not from the Congo itself, through a system of dams into a canal that will run northwest into Lake Chad. But along the way, it will open up a tremendous area for economic development. These tributaries being tapped will also generate millions of kilowatts of energy in terms of electricity for the area. This is really reaching an entire 12-nation area. This has now been taken up by Power China, the company that built Three Gorges Dam, the largest hydroelectric facility in the country. A memorandum has been signed. Power China will now work through and update TransAqua, and together with the Chad Basin nations and Nigeria, they will then move on. The intention is to move on and construct a project that will take decades to complete, but will transform 12 nations in terms of their capabilities, in terms of their the possibilities of growing human creative activity in all forms. So this is an example. No one would take this up until Power China came along. And now it's moving forward for the first time. This is similar projects in South America in terms of transoceanic projects that are proposed. China's deeply engaged in that. Now, how does the United States get into this? How do we join? This is a picture, you can see it there, titled The World Land Bridge. And I don't know if you can make it out, but here is, from the top down, here's the connection between Eurasia and onto Africa and the Americas through Canada, the United States, on down into Latin America, the Caribbean, and South America. The crossing of the Bering Straits. Oh, okay, thank you. Is the question of building a tunnel, a 100-mile-plus tunnel. This is a drawing by for a paper done on this project by Dr. Hal Cooper, a leading railroad engineer, collaborator of ours. Just gives you an idea of what this project would look like to link the Americas and Eurasia. This is well, you can see a cutaway of what that tunnel would look like across the Bering Straits. Now, this has been proposed since the 19th century on both sides of from the American side and from the Russian side. Well, now, for the first time, there is a discussion process. The same parties involved in the Russia-Kazan high-speed rail are now planning to build, this is in the planning stages, but the intention is to build a rail system up to the Bering Straits. Why not cross it? Now, in the United States itself, this is one proposal in terms of a U.S. high-speed rail system built out in 2 phases. A total of 40,000 miles of high-speed rail and maglev. The second phase in red is maglev, which takes us to the next level. Why would we do this? We would do it for the same reasons that the Eurasian Land Bridge, the Silk Road, and so forth are being dealt collaboratively among the nations of Eurasia and Africa. How do you transform the workforce of the United States? How do you rebuild the productive capacity of our nation? This is just a simple, drawn from the U.S. government figures, of the collapse of the labor participation rate in the United States. We could also take charts of growing opioid addiction, suicide rates. All of this has been documented. It's all in the public domain, published from government sources. We're in a crisis in the United States. Well, we've got to create a future. And we've got to, and the part of creating a future is to create a new skilled workforce, not just of a certain level, but a workforce that increasingly sees itself as unlimited in terms of its capacities to grow and develop. High-speed rail is among the most efficient ways to transform your own population, to move it up the skill level, to move it up the educational and cultural level, to transform the culture of the nation. If we want to bring the nation together, we have to bind it. Right? And we can bind it with steel, we can bind it with other forms of connectivity, but this is the process that we're now on the verge of. I don't know if you heard it, President Trump a day or two ago was saying, the Chinese have all this high-speed rail. We don't have any high-speed rail. And our airports and our airplanes are, our airlines are getting worse all the time. I mean, these are just quips, he kicks these around. But the point is, there's now a discussion of infrastructure being a necessary critical investment that now has to be made in the United States. This is a break with Wall Street. It's a break with the idea that money simply is made by making money. As opposed to the monetary process, a monetary process serving a more fundamental purpose, which is to grow the physical economy. And the core element in growing a physical economy is to develop the creative capacities of your people. And those people have been left on the side of the road, so to speak, over the last few decades. The collapse of our manufacturing workforce, inner city crises, you name it. Okay, that's the consequence. So now we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to make a giant leap and build that world land bridge. Now, how do you finance this? China accumulated a great deal of foreign exchange in the course of trade over the last few decades. They're now utilizing that, they're leveraging that, not only for themselves but for the world. That's profoundly important. But what do we do? The Democratic Congress has introduced at least 2-3 bills to the tune of $1 trillion that they propose to build in terms of infrastructure. Their proposals is to go further into debt to do it. The Trump administration has circulated a proposal that would say to hedge funds and so forth, hey, we've got a deal for you. We're going to offer you tax benefits. We're going to basically give you tax breaks to the tune of $200-300 billion. And in exchange, you will come in and put $200-300 billion in as capital, and we'll create an infrastructure bank. And then we'll bring in the hedge funds, because, boy, we can create a revenue stream by building what? Toll roads. Building, Deputy Consul General Shao made the point. Large projects don't pay off in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're long. You've got to have foresight. You've got to have a commitment to the future. And you're going to build your way into that future. That's what you're doing with what you're putting onto the ground in terms of what we're talking about here. Well, if you followed this, President Abe, Prime Minister Abe of Japan, was just here in the United States and offered $150 billion in terms of investment into the United States, and said to President Trump, well, we can build a maglev from New York to Washington, D.C., and it will get you from Trump Tower to Washington, D.C. in an hour. And that's true. That could be done today. There's no such thing that exists in the United States right now. All right? China, the CIC, the Chinese Investment Corporation, which is apparently the second largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, with over $800 billion in assets, has proposed, this is in Hong Kong a few weeks ago, proposed, and this was covered in Bloomberg, Business Insider, so on, Wall Street Journal, and so forth, it proposed that they would like to take a very significant proportion of the $200 billion plus that they have in government bonds and put it into U.S. government or U.S. infrastructure. Well, we're now up to $350 billion. In other words, money that left the United States, in a certain, you could look at it in a certain way in terms of the trade deficit, comes back as investment back into the United States. Well, if we create a national bank, or we can call it an infrastructure bank, but if we create a national bank and say to these parties, to these funds and others, including in the United States, invest these funds as capital into this bank, to capitalize this bank, then this bank can issue a multiple of that capital as credits for long-term projects. We can ensure a return of 5%. We can tie it to a tax revenue stream. We'll be doing exactly what Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton did to pull the United States together at the end of the American Revolution. When we were in hock, we were busted, broke, and the only thing we had was debt. We got everyone who had that debt to put their money into what became the first national bank of the United States, to capitalize it, to invest in the future of the country, canals, roads, so on and so forth. We can do exactly that process again. So it's within reach. We can do this, and we can become a major part of the New Silk Road. And I would just add, just from the standpoint of Texas, as just part of this picture, look, we're on the doorstep of the Caribbean nations, of South America. We have, of course, business relations and so forth already, oil, gas, you name it, tourism and so forth. However, what's now going on in South America, I passed over it very quickly. In South America, China, Russia, other countries are joining with countries such as Bolivia, Peru, and so forth, to build out a whole new infrastructure, including rail. But for example, in Bolivia, a nuclear research city. Evo Morales is intent, the president, on turning Bolivia into a center of high-tech knowledge and nuclear science for all of South America. Ecuador, China's teamed with the government of Ecuador to build out a science city in Ecuador. Now, the dams, all these other projects have been built and are being built and are being expanded throughout South America as we speak, including in Chile, as was referenced. Not only in terms of the electrical side of the thing, the interconnectivity in terms of cable and so on and so forth, but also in terms of boring a tunnel, from one side of South America down there towards the tip, to connect the countries on both sides of that rocky divide. Now, as that infrastructure is all built out, that means you're dealing with an entirely different set of societies with new capabilities that Texas could be selling, could be exporting into, in terms of high-tech manufacturing, into South America and likewise the Caribbean. As opposed to being oil and gas, and so forth, limited, and so forth in terms of our capabilities and how far that reaches in terms of our own state, in terms of its repercussions, positive effects, we could transform Texas in the process of this transformation of the Americas. So again, this is another example of how this process could unfold. So we hope, and we're making an effort on this. We hope that President Trump will attend the Belt and Road Initiative Summit in May in Beijing. Likewise, our task here is to win over the American people to this perspective, which is really a revival not only of Hamilton, but of Lincoln, of Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, of John F. Kennedy. And just finally, space. The space program. The revival of the U.S. space program. China is going there. It's going to the backside of the moon in the next year. The United States, I mean, as you know, we're dependent on Russia just to get to the space station, right? To get people up and down, but also the rocket engines, you know, of the Boeing Lockheed United company. Those rocket engines are Russian rocket engines. We buy them from Russia. I mean, look, let's, you know, and the way forward on this is a collaboration. Space is not empty. This is the frontier for the future of mankind, to move out and discover principles that affect us, that shape, for example, climate change in a way that we're not even looking at generally now, in terms of understanding that process. To other planets, discovering new laws of physics with very, very fundamental, real consequences for industry, for science, for knowledge, for medicine, and so on and so forth. So this is where mankind must go to gain control, ever greater control over his environment, for his own future, and we can go there together. Thank you very much.
Could I invite you to the panel, please?
Go.
Thank you both.
Okay, I think we can agree. We have some hands. I have a couple hands up. What we will do, we have a microphone here. Please use the microphone since it's being recorded. And before we get started, I want to say thank you to the entire panel. I thought the presentations were excellent. And we'll take our first question right here, fourth row back, the young lady in the black sweater. Yes. It's turned on, please.
Hi. My first question is, if the U.S. joins the AIIF or AIIB, what's the first step the U.S. has to take? Does the U.S. have to make a contribution to the bank, and can it then make a withdrawal?
Could you answer that question?
How would that work, and how would we stop people like our new Treasury Secretary from robbing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. From the very beginning of the founding of AIIB, both the Chinese board members and other countries' board members said this bank is open. open to all countries. It is not only limited to China and the Asian countries. Even European countries like Denmark, Britain are all the members of the AIIB. And the purpose of AIIB is to make up the vacuum, especially in the infrastructure construction this region. Frankly speaking, World Bank and Asian Development Bank had been doing so for many, many years, focusing on the Asian infrastructure construction. So AIIB is only to do more on Asian infrastructure construction. Just as we did before with many countries, African countries, American countries, and the United States had been doing together with China in building Asian infrastructure. So once America is ready to join in, it is most welcome. And also, they can, through the channel of, the Treasury channel, like the Ministry of Finance in China and the U.S. Department of Treasury in the United States, they actually, in working level, had some contacts. Once the United States is determined to officially apply for the membership to AIIB, all the members, not China, all the members of the board of AIIB will consider and go through the procedure. That won't take long. So personally, I think it's only a political decision. If the United States is determined to do so, then we could put on the track and got it solved.
But here's a quick on that question: is the membership in the bank to sovereign nations only, or is it open to corporations, C corporations, or is it only open to sovereign countries?
Sovereign countries and all the members, I think, because the member to a bank is not limited to a country.
Okay, that was the question also, I think, right? Yeah. So, was the question answered for you?
Could I just add something on this?
Okay.
Just for those that may not be familiar, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has over 50, I think it's 40 or 50 full members at this point, and there's enough 20, 30 countries that are in the pipeline, so to speak, to join. And this bank, in terms of its capitalization by nations, means that this is a bank that can potentially leverage trillions of dollars of lending, and its purpose is to lend for infrastructure, all kinds of infrastructure. It already includes the European nations, most of them. It includes most of the Asian nations. Japan is the only exception that I know of. And the United States is still on the outside simply because the Obama administration decided we didn't want to be.
Well, here's a scenario, though, on that same question. 10 years ago, there was an earthquake in Haiti. After the earthquake, there was millions sent towards that country to help. Yet, Haiti is still almost in the same position. So therefore, let's think of a bank like the Asian Infrastructure Bank, the AIIB.
AIIB, yes.
How could a bank such as that, with this type of thinking, One Road, Silk Road, how can that be helpful in the Caribbean, a country like Haiti, to any of it on the panel?
Anybody?
Well, yes. No, it's a tragedy. At the time of the earthquake in Haiti, there were proposals. We made them as well. Mr. LaRouche made them specifically for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to be mobilized and for the U.S. to move in, C-4 cargo planes, move engineers in, engineering teams, military engineering teams, and actually transform Haiti. That is, move the population out of the areas that were now disease-ridden, move them to high ground, create new cities, right? Many on a short-term basis, others to be developed more long-term, right? And move to once and for all address, a legacy that dates back to the slave trade in terms of that nation. The AIIB, of course, could lend. And it would be very productive for a bank like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to invest in Haiti, not simply in terms of building sewer lines, sewer systems, electrical lines, but port facilities. The Caribbean nations, where they are, can be major ports and connected to ports, manufacturing, textiles, you name electronics, because you're intersecting the traffic through the Panama Canal. It's like the potential of the, not just the potential, but the reality of the Suez Canal, and of course with the United States, and from there back out through the canal, or the new Nicaragua Canal that's being is in the first stages of develop, into Asia. So the potential of the Caribbean nations, as opposed to being a backward British Commonwealth kind of area known for post office box, banks, and money laundering, can be transformed into actual nations with a great future.
Given, did I develop the question for you first? Before we come to you, did you have a question right here? One second, get the mic, please.
I wrote down a few things that I just thought about. Hi. When you were speaking, the blue suit, you.
Yeah.
And one of you guys had mentioned something about, you said the U.S. or China has, what, 200 and something, almost billion or $1 million that they're willing to invest into the United States, right? That was you who said that. Okay, so, and then you said that you've put some type of infrastructure, railroad infrastructure into Africa and things of that nature. And not to sound offensive, but no one gives anything away for free. So, like, why is China so adamant about all of this investing? Like, why are we in why is not we, but China, in Africa, and are willing to give us $200 and some billion? Like, what are the consequences to that, in a sense of, like I said, no one does anything for free,
Okay.
There's always something.
Yeah.
On the question, we'll pass the question, but in highlighting the question,
Okay.
I want to just mention a point, if you can explain to you what you meant by win, win, and win, the triple win. So please proceed.
I just want to explain some background of South-South cooperation. When we talk about the commercial or the business-like economic cooperation, we mostly focus on the economic benefits. But I want to emphasize that from early 1950s, China has started the cooperation with African countries in the framework or mechanism of South-South cooperation. That means that African countries and China were all developing countries, relatively poor, and cannot reach the level of Western countries. So the developing countries felt that it's necessary for them to collaborate. In some areas, China was strong, like infrastructure construction, railway. In early 60s, China began to build a railway from Tanzania to Zambia, and this railway is still workable. But nowadays, China reached a higher position in terms of economic level. So China needs to make use of its advantage to do more in the South-South cooperation. But compared to 50 years or 60 years ago, China attached more color in this kind of economic and technology cooperation, because the partners from China are not only state-owned companies. Many of them are medium and small-size private companies. That companies are not covered by the state. That means that they need to make their living strength. In other words, they need to make money. Yeah.
I just want to know, because what happens in a lot of the countries that are underdeveloped is, especially Africa, a lot of people came in and said, hey, we're going to borrow these countries all this kind of money, and then knowing that Africa there's nothing that Africa's money is backed off of, neither is American dollars or anything else, but Africa does have a lot of land that is useful. So they could have did that, but they never had the infrastructure to do it. But a lot of countries came in and said, hey, we'll loan you this money, and then you got to pay us back. But Africa had no way. So what happened is they were left under their rule, and it didn't help the people. It hindered the people. And I know, not just with just Africa, but, you know, the United States is my home. So it's like, I have to know, like, well, why would you have $200 and something billion to give to us? Like, why is that going to be off our backs? Like, what are, as individual citizens, will that long-termly affect us? You know, because I've seen countries do that in history,
right?
And it doesn't.
But I think we have to.
Council
It's necessary.
would like to respond.
I would like to respond. As a partner country, underdeveloped country, a partner of China in, for example, the new Silk Road project. So,
Good.
Egypt has something to win from what is China offering. Of course, they are offering us investments, they are offering us to build the railroads, they are offering us a lot. What does China win? Of course, we are, as a country, a sovereign country, we are not stupid. We know that China has something to gain. So what does China gain in investing in Egypt? They are gaining more companies to come. So they have so many, such a big market. They need to market their own industry, their own products outside of China to gain new markets abroad, and this is through Egypt and to Africa and the Middle East. So yes, they have to win something. Of course, they are not doing this for free, but as a population, as a country, we gained a lot. Mm-hmm. We gained investments, we gained infrastructures, we gained the jobs and the project itself. Being part of this big project made Egypt back to the map, to the political map where it used to be in the past. So it's working for us as a third world country. It's working for us.
One second. Before we proceed to the same question, I think it's important to indicate, in respect to what happened in Africa, in respect to development by other countries, the first major development in Africa took place in the building of the rail station, as pointed out by Brian Lance, which was primarily used to move products from mines out of Africa to the nations. The concept of win-win-win, which I was hoping you built on some more, because there's a real win-win concept, and the difference is a win-win-win concept. It's a real concept. The difference is when there's just one win, it remains on the outside in that one individual winning, taken from these other sides. It never gets back in there. For to have a win-win, it involves three pieces. As I was growing up, I was told by many persons, when you do a business development, you also have to have three parts. One part for the product that's being used, one part who's making the product, and the next part to keep the machinery working. That's considered a win-win-win. Very simple business principle in trees. The win-win-win is the same thing. What he's saying, win, China wins, says Africa wins, but so does the equity part of win-win-win is in the middle, where everybody else wins. So I think I really wanted to bring that out, and hopefully that's what you meant when you said it.
And I want to add some win in direct direction. Sometimes win politically, sometimes economically, sometimes culturally. So when we talk about interests, actually interests have several dimensions.
Right.
That's what I want to add.
Let's take the question, the young man in the blue sweater. Then we come to the young lady in the black sweater.
Hello, good evening. My name is Hannibal. Thank you so much for coming to TSU. This is amazing. Whoever set this up, the Schiller Institute, as well as your consulates. Thank you so much for coming here and speaking to us about this. I think it's a very important place, the setting of Houston, the idea that this was founded. I just moved here from D.C., so the idea that this was founded, through the railroads and the fire in Galveston, and that the railroads and infrastructure has always been an important part of Houston culture, I think is very important. The one question I do have, and it's mainly because I didn't hear it at all, and we were talking about the future, we're talking about foresight, and here I am standing here. I was born in the 90s. I don't know how many of us were born in the 90s, but I was born in the 90s. And
90 boy.
and one great thing that we have, as far as 90s children and onward, is the idea that globalization comes supernaturally. The one thing that I would ask, and the one thing that I want to stress, especially as far as solutions are concerned for the U.S., is the idea that we can be leaders in the forefront of the ideas that development brings, and especially in a global context. The Silk Road and the One Belt was so phenomenal for me, not so much because of the economics, but because of the ideas that pushed the economics during those times. And I'm going to bring back the idea that I'm a young person, and the things that I think that young people want are the things that are available now, i.e. lakes, rivers, the land space itself. What or who in these corridors can go ahead and push the emphasis of environmental and sustainable development throughout this process?
Excellent question.
Environmental concerns is always the concern of the plan designer and the leaders of the country. We do have the One Belt, One Road Environmental Protection Fund. It means that when we push on the projects in Myanmar, in Afghanistan, in some relatively underdeveloped countries, we do find the environmental concerns from local society. And also, they raise the question to us. Frankly speaking, if we put the environmental concern to the projects, economically, it will take a big cost. But with the surveillance and the regulation, the partner, company or government, need to pay attention and lift their budget. So still now, China is doing so. The only disadvantage is that we need to do more institutional regulation on every project, everywhere. So it is on the way. Like China's central government, including the Environmental Protection Ministry, is doing its job. And we also welcome the non-governmental organizations to join the effort to keep every project underway in Africa, in Europe, in Middle Asia, do its green way. So that's also in tune with our development strategy, green development. That's what I want to mention. Thank you.
In the black, please.
Is this on? Yeah, okay. In your first remarks, you talked about globalization and versus protectionism.
Yes.
And I think for many nations, these, and ours especially too, the concept of globalization has come to mean that we no longer are self-sufficient in food production, that that protectionism really worked for this country.
Many countries are
many countries, right? So I think that cooperation is different from globalization. I think sovereign nations, cooperating with one another in each other's interest, as you keep insisting, and that's what's beautiful, because our interests at base are the same.
Yeah.
We're all humans. We all have to eat. We all have to, build families and nations. So,
understood.
I thought maybe between you can answer my concerns.
I want to give you my very instinctive response to your question. Actually, every person is selfish. Sometimes it's quite natural to make use of its own advantage. So protectionism is natural. If without the international multilateral organization like WTO, or we call it the tariff organization, individual countries is easily come to protectionism. So my personal understanding is that the only solution is to move on the track of international negotiation, either WTO or other organizations, with negotiation between multiple countries. Each country has to concede its own interest. The final purpose is that put all countries in a relatively equal base. Then we can make use of individuals' advantage and overcome the disadvantage. I don't know.
Is there?
Did you want to comment?
A follow-up?
Well, yes. Let me say a couple of things. I think this brings us back really to this issue of global security for all nations. That the globalization, the concept of globalization that China is promoting is one based on mutual benefit, mutual consultation, where each country's own interests are taken fully into account. And so the term globalization is used in a different way to emphasize a point that we don't want to go back to a geopolitical situation of blocks, of us against them, and so forth. We don't want to fall back into that trap. I view the concept that's developing, that's emerging, not just in terms of China, but in terms of a way forward, is based on this concept of a cooperative world of, as you mentioned, sovereign nation states. And it's as old as John Quincy Adams, a community of principle among sovereign nation states, to quote John Quincy Adams. I mean, that's what in our best days we as the United States have sought, and that's the best path forward. And I think that's avoidance of geopolitics, of blocks, of us against them. That's what has to be avoided, right? And we can work the rest out through mutual consultation and mutual benefit.
In other words, the world cannot be fractionized. It should be a whole family, not blocked as 1940s, like west parts, east parts, Asian parts, Latin American parts. That's old-fashioned. So we need to have a more globalized idea to view something, either in developing or universally.
I think we have a question right behind in the gray sweater, and then we'll move over to next to right. Please, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Hello? Yeah, General Counsel Zhao mentioned there were 6 pairs of relations that China has to handle, and government to government, society to government. But one of the key ingredients in that relationship I see that missing is the political system, that it's so vastly different, that one nation to another. I would say majority of the relations that are along the one road, one belt is democratic society, but China is not quite that way, so it could create, confrontation. For example, it's easy for China to push some kind of strategical project from central government level, but it's very hard for country like the U.S. and India, because the democratic, in one example is China, everybody knows, built the Three Gorges, the massive Three Gorges stand along the Yangtze River, but I cannot conceive that can be possible built here somewhere near the Niagara Falls. And that's one of the things I observe. Another thing is General Counsel Zhao mentioned benefits to all countries, win-win situation. except Mr. Bryan included there's a land bridge built through the Bering Strait all the way to South America, but I didn't see he talked too much about the benefits that how American get a piece of this one bill, one road project. And also, there's Japan. I didn't hear too much about how Japan, South Korea, and the Koreans benefited from them. My third issue is somebody mentioned, because China has long been very well known to build extremely huge project like a Three Gorges Dam, and 2,000 years ago we built a Great Wall that stretched like 5,000-6,000 miles. But and the one of the things, the risk, how you get the culture of China is like to. They so-called fighting against the heaven and fight against the nature. But how we control the risk? I mean, we change things, build huge dams and change the routes of rivers, but nobody can handle that risk. And not smart enough anybody exists on Earth right now can handle that kind of risk.
I think the question was extremely lengthy and broad, so let me bring it back to a smaller question.
I finished, but 3 points.
If it seems to me I was here in the sense of is there any consideration for the environmental impact on the whole and on people and the issues of equity? So if I can bring it down to those things. So while we think of the one road, one bridge, are there concerns for the environment, sustainability, and equity? If we can make it, that was the questions. Any of the.
I want to answer from the end of the question, protectionism. That's environmental protection. Environmental protection is very important, as I mentioned to the young guy. Actually, from the beginning of the initiative, from the governmental level, the government set a group of initiative, One Belt, One Road Environmental Protection Fund. With this fund, the government need to regulate the system to supervise the implementation of projects, either in Africa or in Asia. Actually, it is doing so. With this effort, not only from China, but also the local governments, like the government of Myanmar, the government of Afghanistan, they need to work together to make sure all the projects will take the environmental concern into their consideration. Is it done very well, 100% well? We need to wait and see, because many projects are on the way. And we welcome, as I mentioned, welcome the governmental organization as well as non-governmental organization to take part in the supervision. And the first question I want to mention that please do not underestimate the consultation between America's the federal government and the local state government. With the geopolitical concern and meaning of the project, many consultations take place. I've been working in the U.S. Fed desk for 8 years. Every nationwide strategically meaningful project will be undertaken by either the federal government, also the state level, even the city level government. So there's no difference between United States and America or any other countries like Africa or Russia to implement a very politically meaningful project. But I want to mention that the One Belt, One Road initiative is focused on the economic cooperation, especially infrastructure-focused construction. When we talk about development, a lot of things we can't mention, but now it's focused on infrastructure construction.
It's important to note, as I said, and you can take the mic to the lady.
I'll just add a quick word. No. Japan is very much now involved in this process. Prime Minister Abe's trip to the United States is one side of that. The other is the complete transformation of relations between Japan and one of the leading BRICS countries, Russia. where they've now reached agreements on the development of East Russia, what many people think of as Siberia, port development, energy, and so forth. And as a result, you have a collaboration which is drawing countries together. And Japan, as opposed to a confrontational geopolitical view of its relations to its neighbors, is now moving in a completely different direction. And on that, President Trump, his spokesman stated last week that the United States has no problem with Japan continuing to develop its relationship independently with Russia over the Kuril Islands and so on and so forth, to resolve this through economic development. The United States is going to stay out of that. That they can work that problem through. So this is real. That's a problem dating from World War II, and it's now in the process of being addressed. So that's on the issue of democracy. I think we have to think back. The Treaty of Westphalia. I mean, that's 1648. The Treaty of Westphalia ended the war between Protestants and Catholics in Europe, which had decimated Europe. I mean, more than a third, close to a half of all the towns and so forth were wiped out in the course of the 30 Years' War. The Treaty of Westphalia was based on of seeking the interest of the other, of laying, putting all grudges aside, leave them to the past, seek the advantage of the other nation in your approach. That has guided international law, obviously imperfectly, up into the last decades of the 20th century. When we think about democracy, think about it that, first of all, democracy can take a lot of different forms. Consultation, discussion. I mean, obviously, the question of gridlock in Washington can raise a lot of questions about how effectively our democracy is working right now. I'm not throwing it out, but I'm saying, let's be honest here. This is countries all have their own histories. They have their own pathways. They have their own cultures. The very principle of Westphalia is that you accept those differences and distinctions. Countries have to work out their own paths. Here at this table, we have people from 3 entirely different countries, if you look at their history and their institutions, I think. But they're all moving forward. So we work these problems through. And in terms of Texas, there isn't a single lake in Texas that wasn't created by a dam.
Right.
You wouldn't have a lake anywhere if it wasn't for dams. So, I mean, I'm just saying, man can develop the environment.
We have the lady in the black sweater first, and then we'll go to right. Then we'll come back to others. Please.
Thank you, Brian, for laying a foundation for my question. And I'm so happy that Egypt is representative. I'm Victoria Cohen, and I have a presence in the Middle East, so I want to address, and it could be for all panels, and I love China, by the way. Yes, my question is, I heard natural gas, and I also heard water. And one of the things that I was a part of a panel in the Middle East for, like cleaning the Jordan River, for example, which both parties, like you said, different cultures, different religion, and we both drank the same water. And at that time, it wasn't feasible. I'd like to hear either from Egypt or from yourself, what is China's position in those type of projects that are global and transcend both religion, people groups, culture, as well as, I know that China has a great interest in natural gas that I've been following. I'd like to also ask you, if it's not too much, what's the position when we talk about the climate on uranium? I didn't hear anybody mention that. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Could we hear on the first question, Consul Khalif, and then...
What was the first question?
The first question was the issue of the water project that she was part of in the Jordan River.
And then last for you, is Israel included? And that's a question specifically for you. I came in late, so you might have said that. In the Silk Road Initiative, is that one of the countries with the AIB, or what's the position of Israel versus, with relationship with that same agenda?
In responses, let's try to cramp them in because we have like 6 people still.
Okay. I want to mention that actually within different within different countries, different region, especially the Middle East. Everybody know that politically, culturally, the Middle East is quite complicated. And when we do economic projects, we need to deal with the non-economical elements. So that is what I mentioned when we handle the One Belt One Road initiative. One relations is very important. That's the economic and cultural elements, people-to-people relations. Because without the understanding, mutual understanding and mutual trust, every economic project will meet difficulties. We had some problems. We did meet some difficulties when we push on the economic projects in Myanmar. So we keep it in mind. But how to do it? I think the only way is to learn, to listen, to learn the local people, to listen what they are thinking about. Just as I mentioned, consultation with the leaders and consultation with the community. Without this step, we cannot move on the project. That's my understanding, especially in Middle East.
And also, please note, research has shown very clearly major projects, global projects, always come back to the local community. All projects, like I say, all politics are local. All geopolitics will also be local.
Sure.
So those, so if you remember the 6 points, each point almost came back to politics, but the culture. The government, but the culture. We always have to come back to the people. I want to say, as we pass the mic to the next questioner. Okay. Please.
My name is Mark Blocker. I'm a member of Union Local 2232, Brotherhood of Millwrights, Carpenters, Millwrights, and Pile Drivers, to give it a full name. Anyway, it's Dr. Zhao alluded to the per capita income of China as being something like a third of the typical U.S. And I was just wondering how I'm going to sell this idea to my union brothers, being as the wage scale in China must be proportionately lower. How can United States labor hope to compete in the global market if the trade becomes even more lopsided in favor of China, becoming harder and harder to even purchase American-made tools for our members, for example. So I was just wondering, how could we address the trade imbalance if this dream does become a reality? I'm fully in favor of it. Obviously, it has advantages for many people, but I'm just wondering if my union brothers are going to see it that way, and how I can explain it to them if there is a way. Thank you.
Union member, I know you went to the panel, but I can answer that question helpfully for you a bit. Just consider the tri-rail between Houston, Dallas, and Austin. Okay, let's think of the Union brothers now. To build a rail line requires lots of steel, lots of welders, lots of tradesmen. The first thing you have to do is to build the rail line. If you don't build it, there's no employment, there's no opportunities, no jobs. So to get those same wages, you have to at least have a reason to create a wage. When in the 1930s, right around the time of the Great Depression, what did Roosevelt do? Basically, he started the Works Program. Public Works Program was the basis of getting people out of big debt, getting people more incomes in their hand. Massive public works. When I saw the Silk Road, all I saw was a big, massive public works project. You do a big public works project, you can't help yourself but have many people to work in it. Now, let's speak of China and the trade, right? If there's more products to sell, but if there are more people working, even making higher wages, they can afford to buy more products, different projects, more competition. So I think the union will actually jump on board and public work projects, because all they see is, oh, we remember those. We used to work. I think that can work for them. Yeah. I really need to get to the gentleman in the brown shirt, please.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, all three of you, for your comments, and it's been very interesting. I have so many questions, but I have to boil it down to one question. And the question that I have is, I'm very excited by the projects because I see all these projects as generating real wealth. However, at the same time, in the transatlantic region of the world, our economies are dominated by literally quadrillions of dollars of gambling debts in the form of derivatives, and a number of economists have warned that nothing was truly fixed after the recession of 2007 and 8, and that this house of cards is preparing to blow out again, which you're seeing this through banks in Germany or in Italy or in the United States, which would have global a sweep of effect. And so there's talk now in both political parties and by the new president of reinstating the Glass-Steagall Act, which would effectively encourage that collapse to happen faster so that we could get on with doing what your countries are doing, which is very exciting. But in the meantime, it seems to me that there would be a potential catastrophe if countries are not prepared for this dramatic realignment or correction in the international trade and international markets. So my question is, are both of you, I'm interested in both China and Egypt in their responses here, are your countries aware of this, and what are you doing to prepare and protect the beautiful projects that you have built from the effect of this?
Yes. You mentioning the risk of a world economy. Actually, many people, economists and the administrators, are thinking very seriously. Talking about the world economy system, we need to mention trade system and the fiscal system. The trade system facing the main problem of protectionism, deglobalization, as I mentioned before. We need to keep in mind that free flow of people and capital is always favorable to do free and fair business between countries, between different regions. But the problem is that the protectionism is rising, not only in America, but also in many regions. Many people think in this way. We lost a lot within the previous unbalanced and unfair trade. So each country wants to grab something back. Only the multilateral trade system be set up, only the multilateral negotiation on its right track, this problem will be solved. But now the Doha round, WTO, is still pausing. Nobody is pushing. The previous administration, the Obama administration, set up the TPP, but now you quit. And also, some people are saying TPP is good, but China challenged. It's exclusive. It's not good. So China is pushing on its own Asian regional comprehensive partnership. So in this globalization, multilateralization, many countries need to sit down to negotiate, to talk. Each country needs to be very open to the outside. Any exclusiveness will be a loser. So this trade system, and on the other hand, fiscal system. Yes, fiscal system, QE. That's a big problem. And also the excessive leverage of financial tools, another problem. That's why many people are challenging why the big shots in the Wall Street are making money and all the workers are losing money. So we need sincere negotiation. And also the leaders of the government need to think seriously. Shall we do more on real economy instead of the virtual economy? Shall we do more manufacturing or just financing? So and a lot of questions we are raising too, but the answer should be made by ourselves too. I don't think there's a universal solution for every country to solve their economic problem. That's my understanding.
Yes, I wanted
Oh,
to.
just a moment. Council Khalif would like.
Yes, I would just want to comment on what you said. Concerning Egypt, when it came, for example, for the subprime problems here in the US or in the Western Europe, or strangely enough, Egypt was not as affected as many Western countries. Maybe because of its a little bit protectionist, centralized government. Maybe because it was not as open as other markets in the region. But strangely enough, it was not that affected. And thus, I don't see how in the future we will be more or less affected than if the economy and if the policymakers still continue on the same track, we will not be facing a huge clash or a huge deficit in our country as others have experienced. So maybe this to answer your question, not all countries have faced the same clash and the same monetary problem as the US and Western countries have.
Thank you. We have
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, first of all, please. Thank you. And my name is Dwight Baxter. I'm from New York, and I'm in the world of theater. I'm of the performing arts. And my question, in your planning in bringing the future of everyone together, I never heard the mention of the arts and what's going to happen. Because after we've done all this work, we do have a common thing. We love to dance. We love the theater. We love opera. And as a Broadway Tony winner, I never heard mention of that. And so my question is, what about the performing arts in lieu of the 200 million from China? Because the arts, to me, is always lacked, okay? We never get, we're just the last one. So my question is, what about the performing arts, and what do you plan to do in that planning of it with the future?
Could we ask Brian Lantz, because actually speaking, when he spoke about connecting the road in South America, he actually did mention it actually brings the arts together. He mentioned the word arts at that time. So you missed that one small one.
Yeah, I may have missed.
So let Brian expatiate some more on the arts.
Thank you.
I think the point of Glass-Steagall is very relevant. The G20 summit, and I'm coming back. The G20 summit, which was held in Hangzhou last September 4th and 5th, the top 20 countries, largest countries in the world, agreed we needed a new financial architecture. That wasn't something that was easily agreed to. You can imagine by whom, but it was agreed to. All right, and there's a recognition. Prime Minister Abe has been warning that we're looking at a Bear Stearns moment. 2007. That could happen at any point. So there really is a concern that there's got to be an integrated approach, and the United States has got to step up. And Glass-Steagall here, which is in the platform of both political parties, is something that needs to be moved immediately. In terms of action to clear the way for our participation in the Silk Road. The Silk Road was itself a cultural, more than anything else, a cultural melting pot. You can contribute more to that discussion than I can, I'm sure. Our conference in Berlin was titled Creating a Common Future for Mankind and a Renaissance of Classical Culture. Specifically what we've been emphasizing is bringing, not just in words, we've been bringing cultures together. Every culture, Indian culture, Egyptian, Chinese, European, has its high points, that where the great culture was part of promoting the development of the creative powers of every citizen, right, directly or indirectly. And so that is absolutely essential to what has to happen, again, as part of the new, the broader new Silk Road process. It's the people-to-people exchange.
Yes, very important.
I know that's very central to the whole approach. If you looked at the Hangzhou opening, you had Beethoven performed, you had classical Chinese dance, you had, yeah, right. So, I can only agree. We've been holding a series of concerts. We have a chorus here in Houston, the Schiller Institute Community Chorus. We perform for free, schools, you name it. And we had an event on the occasion of Martin Luther King holiday. From the standpoint of addressing, as Martin Luther King did, the jangled discords and transforming it into a symphony. And at this point, obviously, that's needed very much in this country as well as elsewhere. We've got to work on it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Just add something. Let me just add to your answer to your question by throwing the ball back to you. Now, the governments, for example, the Egyptian government, the Chinese government, the U.S. government, have made all they could to link people together by the infrastructures, by railroads, by whatever. Now, what will the art people do? Now, it's your role now to be on board of these trains we have built. And it's your role now to reach out to people in Egypt, people in China, from the US, and tell them, come to us and we will show you, and we will come to you and you will show us. So I'm throwing the ball back to you.
Okay, we accept the invitation. We accept the invitation. What happened in New York City Ballet, Dance Theater of Harlem, and American Ballet Theater? We accepted the invitation. Houston Ballet, thank you.
Pleasure.
The black hair.
Thank you so much. My name is Vladimir. This was very interesting, and my question is, this is really great, and I know Africa is really the next continent. They are benefiting with the democratic dividend that, as we know. One thing that I haven't heard is that you guys have traditional partners in Africa, Northern Africa, and also Eastern Africa. But I haven't heard from West Africa, which is basically the most populated place in Africa. And as we know, with the democratic dividend, it's going to be very interesting. Also, so I think that you guys need to really work a lot with the continent in Africa, which is, I think this project is an opportunity. But also what people have been complaining is that China, when they come and do and help on those projects, and the knowledge transfer on the human resource on the ground doesn't happen a lot with the enterprises, and is one thing that maybe you guys need to see how they can correct it with the Chinese enterprises. But also the youth. Today, most Africans are under 25, and I really enjoy when I see the young guy speaking. I was very happy. But we work in. I mean, personally, I work in a good project in Africa, and it's very important that you integrate in this wonderful project because the future is the youth, and they have to have their place. In knowledge transfer, whatever we can transfer, so we make sure that the next generation is benefiting, and also to have a long life for this project. It's a very, very important. Vocational training, whatever we can do to help this, and this we're gonna see the result. It's gonna be the next engineer. They can continue this great project. Thank you so much.
That's a very good question. Actually, you mentioned the transformation of the model of China's assistance to Africa. For many, many years, decades, China had been working so hard and were good at building a project like a stadium or buildings, low-cost houses in African countries. Of course, in Western Africa's countries and also Eastern African countries. All of them. Then we found that Western countries like United States is good at something we are not good at. They build the training program. They train the young people to take the information technology skill. They train the nurse of African villagers. And they also build the schools, small-size schools. So in now the U.S.-China bilateral relations, we add something new. That is China, U.S., Africa third-party cooperation. That means that China can make use of its advantage to build a school and then let American teachers or experts come in to join the program, to train the local villagers, to get the skill, and then work together to make a program more useful. So you mentioned the very important thing. We need to speed up the transformation, like combine your advantage, American advantage, and China's advantage together. But of course, we also need to learn American style, like training, like education. In Burma, in Afghanistan, in Iran, we are doing so. That's also the bright spot of U.S.-China relations. That's what we are doing together. That's a wonderful point. Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, before we take a next question, we have, can I see the mics that's out there right now? We have 3 mics out. I have 1 in my hand. We'll take 4 more questions, and this is the order we'll take them in. Actually, unless one person is willing to give up their mic to you, you get the question. This is the second to the last person. This is the last person. There are 2 mics. There are 4 mics, but there are 5 people. Is anyone willing to give up the mic? This guy will get trouble. Yeah, that's right. Come up, see, so basically, it will be done. So we'll begin with the 4 mics. Okay, so we'll 1, 2, 3, 4. The last question will come from teacher. Thank you. Please, it's on you. No, it's still on.
You know, back in the 1930s, when the U.S. was building Hoover Dam, some people were offering that project as one that would rescue the American economy from the Depression. Many times politicians will offer a major capital project as a way to turn an economy around. Currently in China, there's a massive infrastructure program going on that's resulting in what's called ghost cities, cities being built with nobody to occupy them. What I see happening now is maybe construction of ghost trains, high-speed trains being built in different parts of the world with very few passengers. So what are you going to do to avoid repetition of the problem of the ghost cities in China? And I'll ask the man from China.
And that's a question frequently raised to me, especially last year. The infrastructure construction speed was quite high because Chinese businessmen want to use their excessive fund to make money. Of course, they want to adapt their business activity to city or provincial development program. So that's why we build a lot of cities in Inner Mongolia, especially Ordos, and also some cities in North China where they are full of many natural resources. Like some cities in the Shanxi province, they are full of coal. So they make much quick money, and the businessmen use the quick money to build the city. Of course, you know, the developer have the advantage to make money quickly. The problem is there is no much need to live, to invite, to attract people in. For instance, its county's name is Shenmu in Shanxi province. This city's population is only 1/3 million, but they build millions household apartments for the city. Their vision is to attract 2 times our population in to build a more prosperous city. But business economy has its own rule. It's not determined by yours or mine mind. So that's the failure, actually, of the provincial development in China. So there are some ghost cities, especially in the cities with very rich natural resources. But how to solve the problem? Of course, the developers themselves will be responsible for the houses. The only loss the government faces is a bad image of the city. So the only way out is sell the house in low prices. But still problem remains. So in the massive economic planning system, the central government and the provincial government add some new regulation to the developers. Without the limits and the restrictions, you have no access to the housing market. Then stop the way to go on. Thank you.
Thank you. The next. No, in the back.
Thanks for the lecture. Sorry I came. Hello? You hear me? I think about 300 million Arabs and 1.5 billion Muslims are all familiar with a famous phrase by Prophet Muhammad of Islam 1500 years ago. Said, seek knowledge, even if as far as China. And they all know it. I mean, you just check it, you'll find out. And that's really where the Arabs started. And that's where the Silk Road became very well traveled. And because they went to Persia, got the Persian knowledge, they got India knowledge from there, they went as far as China, get the knowledge, they went to Greece, so they collected all of that and developed a great culture that later on transmitted to Europe to go through the Renaissance period. But my questions regarding the Silk Road, because it used to come through Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, all the way through Iran, and then it will come through Baghdad and it's split there, and one goes west and the other one will go through my hometown, Nineveh. It used to be called Nineveh. And then from there it went to Aleppo, and then it went to Istanbul, Turkey. But Nineveh, after that period, it changed its name to Mosul. And Mosul is literally means the connecting point, meaning between Asia and Europe. And that's the name of the city, that's my hometown, and is being bombed the hell out of it by the Americans and Obama, and now by Clinton. But I would like to see this Silk Road really, whether you're going to make it to North America or South America or elsewhere, but I would like to see that Silk Road really to be back to way, of course, surpass its glorious days, and I watch these programs on history all the time. And by the way, I'm a retired petroleum consultant, but I am also have a second degree in history. So I know quite well about history of China and the invasions and the Genghis Khan and the Hulagu Khan that destroyed Baghdad, and the whole region, the Middle East. But really, this will be a great project that could resurrect that whole region from all the problems that is going there. And I personally, I've been here, by the way, 56 years. I came the first year John F. Kennedy was president. But this country has gone really downhill, and I don't believe they're going to help the Middle East any way they can. But for certain, the greatest benefit will come is the Middle East is when they open that highway between the Middle East and China, and they should have a railroad, they should have gas pipelines, they should have oil pipeline, forget all the ships and everywhere else, and could go all the way straight there. And I believe that will be the greatest benefit of this project that will come out of it.
Thank you very much. We have a comment.
First of all, I want to pay respect to you, especially for your special background from the very honorable place, very respectful place. As you said, Silk Road is a vessel of ancient honor of culture. Silk Road is the result of combination and exchange of different culture. So the Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road initiative focused not only on economic outcome, but also on the people-to-people exchange, the cultural exchange. As I mentioned several times, without people's mutual understanding and mutual trust, no economic result will be realized. So while we do the economic projects like infrastructure construction, we also do cultural exchange, bring the glory culture to its local country or local city, and build our economic projects. So I will keep in mind, and I'll pass your message to China's government. When we do the economic projects, anytime the culture will be kept in mind and taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add, just as an example, over 80% of all the trade, foreign trade with Syria is with China right now. And there's a intense process. You know, the Astana talks are going on right now, involving Turkey and Russia and Iran, and China has been promoting since last year a 5-point program approach, which involves really extending the Silk Road all the way into North Africa, and specifically wanting to invest in the most war-torn areas, because you have to, among other things, you have to dry out, as we say, the conditions that create the breeding ground for terrorism. You know, the fatalism, the pessimism, and so forth that breeds terrorism. So you know, just you might want to add more, but I just wanted to emphasize that we have been advocating. The Schiller Institute, Helga Zeppel-LaRouche in particular, look, I mean, here's Europe with this huge refugee crisis. You want to talk about walls, look at all the walls that are being built in Europe to try to keep out refugees. You know, it's inhumane, it's a disaster. Let's rebuild these war-torn countries. Let's reverse this process of regime change. Let's pay, you know, for what, you know, the damage that was done. Let's how to make good, right? Make good our debt.
And I want to add that actually American companies and Chinese companies are working together in Iraq to reconstruct this country. We are working together, actually.
Good.
Thank you.
We have
Okay. Great. My name is Jean Sadrach Sirius. I was born in Haiti, so I'm Haitian. I live in this great city of ours. You know about Haiti, I'm sure you heard of the earthquake, and recently we had the hurricane. My country, Haiti, has a lot of problems now. We have recently just elected a new president who really want to do a lot for Haiti, help rebuild the country. And Haiti is now open for business. Okay? I heard a great question that he just asked, and I also heard a great response, an excellent response I was given to his questions. What I'm wondering about is that how do we implement that? How do we go forth? Because we want to help the country. We want to help Haiti. I'm here in Houston, and I think of Haiti every day. And because I see, you know, what I'm doing here, the Lord bless me. I was born there, I was extremely poor. And my father, you know, was gone, died. And about 7 years of age, that's when someone went to Haiti and saw me and discovered me, and the rest is history. Somebody gave me $20 a month. I was able to go to school. I went to TSU. I got my first degree here. You see, and because of someone who heard about me when I was a little boy after I lost my father and so on, I used to spend days, a week without a meal. And then just because someone heard about me and decided to sponsor me with $20 a month, today here I am. Okay? So I wrote a book called Haiti Beyond the Rubble. Okay? It's in French, Spanish, and English, because I speak some of those languages. My quick question to you, I would like to be able to help you to help me to help Haiti. How do we do that?
I can share with you two information, very important. One is that although China didn't include Latin America, of course, the Caribbean region to the One Belt One Road initiative at the first stage, some Latin American countries proposed they want to join in. That's Chile. That's why Chile president will attend the May summit in Beijing. And the Chile president, for the first step, initiate the idea that China and Latin America jointly build a fiber optics through the seabed of Pacific. That means that the One Belt One Road will beyond the Asian construction. It could reach as far as Latin America. That's one very important information. That means that we could be very inclusive to work together with Latin American countries. The second one is that actually there is an existing mechanism, bilateral and regional mechanism between China and the Caribbean countries. That's CARICOM China Cooperation Mechanism. Last year, we held the president-level, high-level summit in Latin America. All the 15 CARICOM member countries joined the meeting with us, even though there are some countries, they had no official diplomatic relations with PRC, People's Republic of China. As you know, some of the Caribbean countries are still having so-called diplomatic relations with Taiwan. So, but it doesn't matter. China's still doing bilateral economic cooperation with Caribbean countries. As for Haiti, I don't think it will be a problem. As long as your government and even your private sectors raise a proposal to us and puts the topic on the table, in the table of May summit or other high-level meetings, China will take it seriously. And all the South-South cooperation are all on the agenda of China. Thank you.
Consul Zhao, based on this question and based on the audience that's here right now, he pointed out two ways of helping. I would like to point out we can take those two ways of helping beyond the words of helping that way by reaching out to Brian Lance, Gaius, and some others I know in the community to probably invite you back to another panel right here at Texas Southern to focus on the Caribbean. We will focus on the Caribbean and have some real discussions, and by your sponsorship, I think we can bring the persons that you think should be around the table in that discussion. So we'll state that on the record, and now we'll move to Keisha.
Okay. I would like to thank all. There we are. I'd like to thank all three of you for your remarkable comments and inspiration. And that's the basis of my discussion is, first of all, we have to get this message out to the young people because there's not enough young people in this room, and I'm very happy for those who did come because we've really lost sight of what we're talking about is vision. What we're talking about is inspiration. And for many people to remember, we're going to be commemorating the anniversary on Monday of the United States space program with John Glenn, who orbited the Earth 3 times 4 hours and 55 minutes. And Kennedy had a vision, President John F. Kennedy, that we would send to man to the moon and return him safely to Earth. But that wasn't just some one-time short-term fix. That was about having foresight, having a vision into the next generations and into the future. China now is going to be taking up a remarkable vision and direction by going back to the moon and also going where no man has gone before, to the far side of the moon. And you also have, what Egypt has done to uplift the young people with the development of the Suez Canal. And right now there's not enough talk about what these young people had to see as this is their mission, this is their future. How do you take this? This is not just infrastructure projects we're talking about. You need to get your young friends in here and tell them that, look at our society, the drug abuses, the suicides. this is what is going to pull them out of that. And I want to thank you all and ask that you give your honest expressions about what we can do to reach the young people again. Thank you.
We will have some closing remarks from each of you, but before I do, I will use what I call executive privilege.
Oh dear. Gee. Well, I don't know if this is on track with the other things that you all have discussed, but as I was listening, I was just thinking about a young Chinese student that I tutored years ago who, in a very painful voice, talked about relations between Japan and China. And he expressed that, this is some of the racism that was coming from that, and I wanted to ask about that because I know we've battled that here in our country, and we're doing what we can to, so what are the relations now with China and Japan, if you don't mind my asking, and are you working through those things?
I'm quite willing to answer your question because I love Japan very much. I learned Japanese in the high school days. Konnichiwa, konbanwa, irashaimase, something like that. And the dream I had was to study abroad in Japan. So actually, I want to tell you that actually in the people-to-people level, the exchange between Japan and China is still frequent and often and hot. Japanese people, I don't know Japanese people, how does Japanese people love China nowadays, but a lot of Chinese people love Japan very much. We watch Japanese animation movie, play Japanese games, and also watch Japanese TV dramas, a lot of them. And in 1980 and 1990s, a lot of Chinese people, young people, go to Japan to study, to work, and also cross-border marriages. A lot of them are doing so. So people-to-people exchange is very good, sound, and positive. Still now, the tourists from China to Japan is still on the track of uphill. So no worry about Japan-China people-to-people relations. The only problem is governmental relations, and the only obstacle is the political obstacle. Why? History. Abe administration still does not recognize there was a Nanking rape. There was no aggression from Japan to China. No colonialization in 1930s. That's totally unacceptable, either by Chinese government or Chinese people. If this core problem solved, nothing will be left. So we are doing this way. Let Japanese people and Chinese people communicate, exchange with each other more often. Let the economic cooperation between China and Japan more prosperous. And let the power from grassroots exert its influence to the top level, to the government. Let the government change their policy. And we are confident that there are wise politicians and there are wise statesmen in Japanese government. Once the foundation is solid enough, the top level problem will be solved.
I'd just like to add very briefly that one of our international advisors to the Schiller Institute is a gentleman named Kodagawa, who's the former representative of Japan to the International Monetary Fund, among his other responsibilities. And he is one of the biggest supporters and spoke at our Berlin conference that I referenced before. And those reports are available outside for anyone who would like a copy of those reports. But so I'm just saying that, secondly, I would just add that the vastly improving relations of Japan with Russia and the common ground that's been found over the Kuril Islands dispute that goes back to the same period, roughly we're talking about the same period. there's indirect ways. You know, you're talking about now a fabric of nations. The fact that Japan's relations with Russia are changing, and China is a friend with Russia, and Japan is becoming a friend with Russia. Well, then, you know, a way can be found to bridge that other relationship. So I think, you know, this is the Silk Road process unfolding. There is an improving set of relations.
Thank you.
Carson, any closing remarks?
Closing remarks. Okay. So, as a closing remark, I would rather answer Keisha's question about what to say to the young generation and the future generation. First of all, I would like to tell them, don't get caught about or in what our generation and the generation before us have experienced. You don't have to live the wars we have lived. You don't have to live the crisis we have lived. Think about the Silk Road. Think about partnership. Think about civilizations. Think about cultural exchanges with other nations. Even in your own country, as I speak now to the American generation, young generation, think about your country internally, about different minorities, different races, different origins, different political backgrounds. Think about that in the vision and in the spirit of the Silk Road, that we can all reach each other, that we can build, that we can construct something that will live and benefit our generation and the generations to come. So do not get caught in our problems, the political, the crisis, what you see on television. Go beyond that. Think about a brighter future. Think about cooperation. Think about tolerance. And then you will have succeeded, and then you will have made a change. Thank you.
As a diplomat, I've been working in the central government level, federal level, for almost 9 years, and finally, when I got a post in Houston, I found that actually the bilateral relations is not determined by the central or federal government. It is determined by the people, the grassroots people. So everybody sitting here, standing here, working here in Houston, in village counties, you are the decider, you are the determiner, that we work together to move the trend, to put other people, American people, Egyptian and Chinese people, work together to reach the win-win-win cooperation. Thank you.
Brian. Well, we've, as everyone can appreciate, we've covered a lot of ground this evening. And I think if we take the message, as Council Khalif was saying, of the Silk Road out to youth, to our communities, we can inspire them. And we can also inspire by reminding them of things that occurred before they were even born. When we went to the moon, when we took a broken country in the 30s and built it, that we can do again the kinds of things that Egypt and China are inspiring their people to do. We can be that kind of country again. We've been really through 16 years of continual warfare in this country. I mean, war. We've been engaged in continual war in the world. It's taken a terrible toll. We have a generation growing up now that has only experienced that in terms of their conscious, really conscious lives. So it's important now to take these examples. Not simply examples, but as this tremendous opportunity, like a golden apple or something that's just out there, and to seize it, to seize this opportunity. I think I'll just conclude with that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you to the guests. It was excellent. Like we said, we have a plan. It's been put in place. We shall reach out to the group here, and we shall reach out to another summit focusing on how we can connect this with the Caribbean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give a round of applause again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
I thought it was very successful.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, no. And we'll do it again in some other context. But also, if we can help, fight us, fight me, I'm just saying, let's collaborate.
So take a picture for you. Thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot there. Okay, sure.
I need to try and get a picture with the whole panel, okay?
Here's my general number.
We want to get a picture with the whole team.
Okay. Yes.
You ready?
Thank you.
I'm going to get a picture.
Okay, sure.
Right. Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Let's keep the good memories. I'd rather than
Yeah, and that will be China, Japan, global. Thank you. Thank you.
She's trying to take a picture.
No, she's the picture. Okay. Let's come right here. Stay right here.
No. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. How do we do it?
Photo opportunity.
Yes.
No funny picture? No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
No funny pictures, just good pictures.
I don't think so. Thank you.
Yes. I need to slide back up.
Thank you.
What happened to you?
Thank you for your work.
It's the slides gone.
Need to see more.
Yes.
She deleted the Chinese slides.
No, I made the slides.
Oh, the one that you made. I didn't touch that.
Bring it back in.
Exactly, so that I can write to you
They live there already with
Thank you. Yes. It's under that. Okay, because you know what? I have always.
I said I'm one of my age. That's all. Because I'm so
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
Well, do you want to send it to your email? Send it to me.
I'll send them all up.
Okay. Okay, so you want me to send it to the classmates? Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Donc, merci pour ce moment. Mais